Dona Maria I was Queen of Portugal, Brazil, and the Algarves. Known as Maria the Pious, or Maria the Mad, she was the first undisputed queen regnant of Portugal. With Napoleon's European conquests, her court, then under the direction of Prince Dom João, the Prince Regent, moved to Brazil, then a Portuguese colony. Later on, Brazil would be elevated from the rank of a colony to that of a kingdom, with the consequential formation of the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil and the Algarves. Early life. Maria was born at the Ribeira Palace in Lisbon and baptized Maria Francisca Isabel Josefa Antonia Gertrudes Rita Jona. On the day of her birth, her father, King John V of Portugal, created her the Princess of Beira. When her father succeeded to the throne in 1750 as Joseph I, Maria, at age 16 and as his eldest child, became his heiress presumptive and was given the traditional titles of Princess of Brazil and Duchess of Braganza. Influence of the Marquis of Pombal. Maria grew up in a time when her father's government was dominated completely by the first Marquis of Pombal. Her father would often retire to the Queluz National Palace, which was later given to Maria and her husband. The Marquis took control of the government after the terrible 1755 Lisbon earthquake of the 1st of November 1755, in which around 100,000 people lost their lives. After the earthquake, Maria's father was often uncomfortable at the thought of staying in enclosed spaces, and later suffered from claustrophobia. The king had a palace built in Ajuda, away from the city centre. This palace became known as Real Barraca de Ajuda because it was made of wood. The family spent much time at the large palace, and it was the birthplace of Maria's first child. In 1794 the palace burned to the ground and Ajuda National Palace was built in its place. In 1760 Maria married her uncle Pedro, younger brother of her father José I. They had 6 children, of whom the eldest surviving son succeeded Maria as João on her death in 1816. Reign. In 1777, Maria became the first undisputed queen regnant of Portugal and the Algarves. With Maria's accession, her husband became king as Peter III. Despite Peter's status as king and the nominal joint reign, the actual regal authority was vested solely in Maria, as she was the lineal heir of the crown. Also, as Peter's kingship was iuris only, his reign would cease in the event of Maria's death, and the crown would pass to Maria's descendants. However, Peter predeceased his wife. Maria is considered as having been a good ruler in the period prior to her madness. Her first act as queen was to dismiss the popular Secretary of State of the kingdom, the Marquis of Pombal, who had broken the power of the reactionary aristocracy via the Tavora affair, partially because of Pombal's Enlightenment, anti-Jesuit policies. Noteworthy events of this period include Portugal's membership in the League of Armed Neutrality and the 1781 cession of Delegado Bay from Austria to Portugal. Queen Maria suffered from religious mania and melancholia. This acute mental illness made her incapable of handling state affairs after 1792. Mental deterioration. Maria's madness was first officially noticed in 1786, when Maria had to be carried back to her apartments in a state of delirium. Afterward, the Queen's mental state became increasingly worse. In May 1786, her husband died. Maria was devastated and forbade any court entertainments. According to a contemporary, state festivities began to resemble religious ceremonies. Her condition worsened after the death of her eldest son, aged 27, from smallpox, and of her confessor in 1791. In February 1792, she was deemed mentally insane and was treated by Francis Willis, the same physician who attended King George III of Great Britain. Willis wanted to take her to England, but the plan was refused by the Portuguese court. Maria's second son and new heir apparent, John, took over the government in her name, even though he only took the title of Prince Regent in 1799. When the Real Barraca de Ajuda burned down in 1794, the court was forced to move to Queluz, where the ill queen would lie in her apartments all day. Visitors would complain of terrible screams that would echo throughout the palace. Napoleonic Wars. In 1801, the Spanish Prime Minister Manuel de Godoy sent an army to invade Portugal with backing from Napoleon. He was later forced to abandon the campaign that same year, though the Spanish ceased their invasion. The Treaty of Badajoz on 6 June 1801 forced Portugal to cede Olivenca and part of Guyana to Spain. This cession is not recognized by the present Portuguese government, and the country officially considers those territories still to be Portuguese possessions. The refusal of the Portuguese government to join the French-sponsored continental blockade against Britain culminated in the 1807 Franco-Spanish invasion of Portugal led by General Junot. The ultimate Napoleonic plan for Portugal was to split it into three sections. The northern parts of Portugal, from the Douro to the Minho, would become the Kingdom of Northern Lusitania, and its throne was promised to King Carlo Lodovico II of Etruria. The Alentejo province and Kingdom of the Algarve would be put together to form the Principality of the Algarves, of which the Spanish Prime Minister Manuel de Godoy would be sovereign. The remaining portion of Portugal would have been directly ruled by France. Transfer to Brazil at the urging of the British government. The entire Braganza dynasty decided to flee to Brazil on 29 November 1807 to establish a government in exile in the Portuguese Viceroyalty of Brazil. Along with the royal family, Maria was transported aboard the Carrack Príncipe Real. During her move from the royal palace to the docks, she was heard screaming throughout the trip, in the middle of the crowd and in the carriage. The Queen's dementia was so great that she feared that she was going to be tortured or robbed during her movement by her servants. In January 1808, Prince Regent João and his court arrived in Salvador da Bahia. Under pressure by local aristocracy and the British, the Prince Regent signed a commercial regulation after his arrival that opened commerce between Brazil and friendly nations, which in this case represented the interests of Great Britain above all. This law broke an important colonial pact that had previously allowed Brazil to maintain direct commercial relations only with Portugal. On 1 August 1808, the British General Arthur Wellesley landed a British army in Lisbon to initiate the Peninsular War. The impact of Wellesley's initial victory over Junot at the Battle of Vimeiro was wiped out by his superiors in the Convention of Sintra, which allowed the defeated French troops to evacuate peacefully from Portugal. Wellesley returned to Portugal on the 22nd of April 1809 to recommence the campaign. Portuguese forces under British command distinguished themselves in the defence of the lines of Torres Vedras and in the subsequent invasion of Spain and France. In 1815, the government of the Prince Regent João elevated Brazil to the status of a kingdom, and Maria I was proclaimed the Queen of the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil and the Algarves. When Napoleon was finally defeated in 1815, Maria and her family remained in Brazil. Death and legacy. Maria lived in Brazil for a total of 8 years, always in a state of incapacitation. In 1816, she died at the Carmel convent in Rio de Janeiro at the age of 81. After her death, Prince Regent João was acclaimed the King of Portugal, Brazil, and the Algarves, and his mother's body was returned to Lisbon to be interned in a mausoleum in the Estrela Basilica, which she had helped found. Maria is a greatly admired figure in both Brazil and Portugal due to the tremendous changes and events that took place during her reign. In Portugal, she is celebrated as a strong female figure. Her legacy shines at Portugal's Queluz Palace, a Baroque Rococo masterpiece that she helped conceive. A large statue of her stands in front of the palace, and a posada near the palace is named in her honor. A large marble statue of the Queen was erected at the Portuguese National Library in Lisbon by the students of Joaquim Machado de Castro. In Brazil, she is admired as a key figure in the eventual independence of Brazil. It was during her reign, albeit through the government of her son's regency, that many of the national institutions and organizations in Brazil were created. These institutions were the precursors to the modern-day equivalents and granted large degree of power to the Brazilian colonials. While she is often called de Luca in Brazil, Brazilian and Portuguese historians hold her in high esteem. Titles, honors, and styles. Titles and styles. The 17th of December 1734 to 31 July 1750, Her Royal Highness the Princess of Barra, Duchess of Barcelos. The 31st of July 1750 to 24 February 1777, Her Royal Highness the Princess of Brazil, Duchess of Braganza. The 24th of February 1777 to 16 December 1815, Her Most Faithful Majesty the Queen of Portugal and the Algarves. The 16th of December 1815 to 20 March 1816, Her Most Faithful Majesty the Queen of the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil and the Algarves. The official styling from her accession till 1815 was, by the grace of God, Maria the First, Queen of Portugal and the Algarves, of either side of the sea in Africa, Lady of Guinea and of conquest, navigation and commerce of Ethiopia, Arabia, Persia and India, etc. With the creation of the Kingdom of Brazil, her style changed too. By the grace of God, Maria the First, Queen of the United Kingdom of Portugal, Brazil, and the Algarves, of either side of the sea in Africa, Lady of Guinea and of conquest, navigation and commerce of Ethiopia, Arabia, Persia and India, etc. Honors as Queen of Portugal. Maria was Grand Mistress of the following Portuguese orders: Order of Christ, Order of St. Benedict of Aviz, Order of St. James of the Sword, Order of the Tower and Sword. Marriage and issue. Maria married her uncle, Infante Pedro of Braganza, on the 6th of June 1760. At the time of the marriage, Maria was 25 and Pedro was 42. Despite the age gap, the couple had a happy marriage. Peter automatically became co-monarch when Maria ascended the throne, as a child had already been born from the marriage. The couple had 6 children and a stillborn baby. Ancestry. Popular culture. Featured as a playable leader in the computer strategy game Civilization V, Brave New World. Bibliography. Checky, Marcus. Carlota Joaquina, Queen of Portugal. London, England. Sidgwick and Amp. Jackson. Benavides, Francisco da Fonseca. Reinas de Portugal. Estudo Histórico, Volume 1. Lisbon, Portugal. Typografia Castro Urmão. Benavides, Francisco da Fonseca. Reinas de Portugal. Estudo Histórico, Volume 2. Lisbon, Portugal. Typografia Castro Urmão. Gomes, Laurentino. 1808. How a mad queen, a coward prince and a corrupt court fooled Napoleon and changed the history of Portugal and Brazil. Planeta.